Fox News Alert now. We have a live look at the crowd of protesters at the Michigan State Capitol in Lansing, where just moments ago the legislature approved a measure paving the way for Michigan to become the 24th right-to-work state in the country. It's basically freeing workers from having to pay union dues. And it also deals a huge blow to organized labor. State troopers are now guarding the House and the Senate chamber entrances as protesters clog the Capitol. Now, earlier, an angry confrontation broke out. Union protesters apparently storming the tent of the local chapter of the conservative group Americans for Prosperity. They tore it down, and then they went after some right-to-work supporters. Let's watch this.
Shut your mouth. Shut your mouth. I wasn't talking to you. You put your hands on me, see what happens. Shut up. Shut your mouth. Out here. You ain't got to film it. Hey, you got knocking the camera off. Out of here. I didn't do it. I got a right to do it. I didn't do it. You did too. Not on your face. Get the out of here, you. We don't trust you. We don't trust you. You're not to be trusted. You're either with us or against us. Go.
And we're just seeing new information crossing right now that moments ago the state legislature gave final approval for this, as Michigan will become, once the governor signs it, the 24th right-to-work state. This comes after President Obama backed the union's cause yesterday. So we're now waiting to see what the White House has to say about those violent scenes like the one we've been watching. Leslie Marshall is a syndicated radio talk show host and Fox News contributor. Lars Larson is a syndicated radio host with Compass Media Networks. Welcome to both of you.
Good morning.
Hi.
Lars, what do you think about the president wading into the fray yesterday? He was supposed to be making a talk on the fiscal cliff, but he decided to bring up Michigan. Do you think that he somehow, intentionally or not, emboldened the protesters there?
Of course he did. I mean, imagine this. This guy is bought and paid for. Literally hundreds of millions of dollars of union contributions helped put President Obama back in for a second term. The fact that he's backing the thuggish behavior of unions in Michigan, I mean, he backed the thuggish behavior of unions in Wisconsin. And it should be, well, if you're a union member, you ought to be ashamed of the behavior of your union brothers. There's a democratic process. The people of Michigan have elected representatives and an elected governor. They've made a choice to change the law and take away this crazy monopoly that lets unions force people to be members. I once had to be a member of a union. I hated it because they made me do things I didn't want to do. It's an inherently corrupt kind of organization to say you have to belong to a union to have a job. And the fact that the president gets into the middle of this and emboldens these people, and they're tearing down tents and threatening people, it's ridiculous, and the president ought to stand up and take responsibility for it.
Leslie, what do you think about him weighing in on this controversy?
I think it's necessary. I mean, you have the president of the United States who said, let's bail out the auto industry, whose hub is the state of Michigan, and they have been successful. For him to be talking about the economy, standing in Michigan with what was going on, and for him to avoid this whole topic would be ridiculous, whether he's a Democrat or a Republican. Now, Lars, I know you think that the president's our daddy, but he isn't. These are grown men, and some of them aren't acting like grown men, but I've seen certainly people left and right, when you get a bunch of people together and they're angry and they're emotional and there's that gang mentality. But don't paint all of the union workers in Michigan and throughout this country as being violent and just with that broad sweeping paintbrush, or that the president has any responsibility with their actions. He did not tell them to be violent. He told them to fight for what they believe in.
Lars, your response?
Fight for what they believe in? I got to tell you something. Leslie, you say it's necessary. The president did embolden these actions. And the fact is that I've been covering unions for the better part of 35 years, and you almost always see illegal activities, violence, assaults, and this kind of behavior from unions that are on strike. And you say they have a right to be angry? The people of Michigan have a right to change their laws through the process. And what these union thugs are trying to do is swarm the Capitol and through bullying tactics and physical intimidation get the state of Michigan and its representatives to go a different direction, not through the legal process, but by being physically intimidating. And you think that's something to be proud of?
Leslie, see, what's curious here is that 2 years ago, when some of these very similar scenes were breaking out in Madison, Wisconsin, over the collective bargaining proposal there, the president really stayed out of the fray. He in fact said, I call this a Wisconsin issue, meaning let's leave it to the state. But here, on an issue that is not as controversial as collective bargaining, it's about forcing people to pay union dues, he did weigh in. Why now and why not then?
Well, first of all, you know, as a liberal, many liberals, and myself included, were like, why isn't the president going to Wisconsin? Why isn't he speaking about that? But let's look at what was on his plate on an international level regarding terrorism, etc. First of all. Second of all, Wisconsin, although the auto industry does have some plants, etc., that is certainly not the state of Michigan. You have a president who, against many Democrats, and certainly all the Republicans pretty much said, we got to bail out the auto industry. Even many Americans poo-pooed this idea. This is a success. Secondly, the president already had this planned to speak at these states regarding his position so that we do not go over the fiscal cliff, and to work with Republicans, he and Democrats together, to come up with a solution so that we're not going to hell in a handbag when it comes to December 31st at 12:01. This was part of a plan, so I find them very different. I don't have a problem with them speaking out on this in Michigan and not having done so in Wisconsin.
All right, so Leslie doesn't see any sort of conflict there. Lars, what's your response to that?
Listen, here's what the president was doing back then. He was doing the same thing he's done for 4 years, jetting around the country, giving speeches and raising money. And the fact is that he was not too busy to go to Wisconsin. We all pointed it out at the time. He didn't want to go there because he didn't think it was to his political advantage. Now that he's been reelected, and again, I point out, with literally hundreds of millions of dollars of union contributions, the unions own this president, and this president now wants to sound like he's taking their side in it. And it's crazy. Go ahead.
I just want to bring up one thing in our remaining few seconds, because, Leslie, the president said something that was possibly incorrect yesterday. He said that it's legislation like this that will lower workers' wages, when in fact the Bureau of Labor Statistics in their latest report say that it's the right to work states where workers' wages are higher by, on average, $49,000 versus $42,000. Here are the statistics. So the president was actually inaccurate when he said that this would lower workers' wages. Why would he say that?
Well, you know, I'm glad that you brought that up, because one of the things that my buddy is on the right, like Lars, would say is we're paying these people too much and we can have more people and pay them less, etc. And what we're talking about is I agree with you as far as those statistics, that can't be argued. But the bottom line is the reason Michigan is doing well now and better is the auto industry, and they're producing a better product because they have those union workers. And to ask union workers to pay dues and have other people benefit from the same things that they are within the union, that's unfair. And this is a president that fairness is his motto.
Okay, very quickly, Lars, your reaction.
You know what's unfair is making American workers join a political organization that they choose not to join just to have a job. And the fact is, it's unions that put the big three automakers in the tank. You know that GM is not out of the woods at this point, despite this much vaunted bailout that you talk about. You know that GM is still in trouble financially. Chrysler isn't even an American company anymore. It's owned by the Italians. It has been a colossal disaster, and it's going to continue to be. The unions, with their work rules and exceptions and restrictions on workers, not so much the paycheck. Most of the three big Japanese makers in the South that are not dominated by unions do not have those work rules, but they pay about the same dollars per hour in wages. So the wages can be paid. It's the crazy union work rules and defending people who drink on the job, for example, that have caused problems that are running American business out of the country.
All right, Lars Larson, Leslie Marshall, kudos to both of you for being able to debate over the cacophony coming out of Lansing. We obviously will stay with
we didn't have
that.
any beeps.
That's right.
We didn't have
Kick
any
those
beeps.
union thugs out.
Nicely done, both of you. Thank you so much. Meanwhile, a
Take care.
popular U.S.